Welcome aboard, everyone. It's Thursday afternoon, and you're with the hockeydebates.com podcast team of Kevin Allen and myself, Bob Duff. It's Thursday, so naturally our topic of discussion, as it is every Thursday, is hockey betting. You might think on the surface there's not a lot to bet about, and as someone who writes about sports betting, I can tell you it's been slim pickings of late. I just did a piece yesterday, Kevin, on a sportsbook actually put out betting lines on a simulation of an NFL game between the Cowboys and the Eagles that was being played with a Madden EA Sports game. And point spreads and money lines and over-unders, the whole thing. And they actually, it was bizarre. I even watched a little bit of it just out of curiosity. And that's Bizarro World as far as I'm concerned. And then even today now there's lines out on the Donald Trump daily press conference on what words he's going to say, what adjectives he's going to use, and the over-under on how many times he's going to say great, how many times he's going to say it's not our fault, and how many times he's going to say there's tests for everybody, all that stuff. So we really have kind of crossed into the vortex into, I don't know if this is the sign of the apocalypse for sports betting, but it's certainly getting crazy.
Well, for sure. And I think people are going a little stir crazy as well. So, you're sequestered at home, you're in quarantine. It feels like even if you don't have any symptoms, but you're trying to avoid people. I was out with my wife taking a walk today, and when you're coming across someone else who's taking a walk, one of you moves left or right, and it's a complicated world right now. And I'm not surprised at all that people wanted to bet on a simulation. First of all, you and I both know, even though it's not our world, that people are very interested in gaming, and gaming in general draws a lot of interest. And in some of these competitions, you get an arena full of people come to watch other people do online gaming in competition. So I'm certainly not surprised at that, and I think people are sports starved. A friend of mine is doing simulations on the greatest players from each franchise competing against one another, and he said the traffic on that is very good because I think people just want to have some, measure of competition. It's really unfortunate too that this was supposed to be the big first year of betting, where everybody was. There were, it was legal in more places, and you could, place bets, and here we have everything, kind of interrupted and disruptive of that, and so we won't really have a good handle on how much interest there'll be in betting based on this season, because it's just going to be a hard read.
Yeah, and your state, Michigan, literally opened legal sports betting parlors the day before all sports shut down. So you can't even gauge how much it would have meant to Michigan to, usually when you open a new one, there's a burst of wagering because everybody's so excited about it. But Michigan never even got that excitement level because it's literally the moment they opened, everything shut down.
Yeah, no, it's and I think that this is going to be one of those seasons where you're going to remember it your entire life, regardless of what happens. If you're part of a team, let's just say that the season goes right to a playoff, that we do get to play, but goes to a playoff. And, if you're one of the teams that's on the outside looking in, and whatever's decided leaves your team out in the cold, you're going to be bitter about that. You're going to say, well, our team, if you're a Coyotes fan and you're not awarded a spot in the playoffs, and you're going to say, yeah, but I looked at our schedule and I really felt we were going to be, you're going to be bitter about that. And of course, if you have success, and you're going to remember that, hey, that was the year we made a great run, but it was kind of marred by the coronavirus, and we had a shutdown, and we were playing playoff games in the middle of the summer when it was baseball weather. It's all going to be sort of embedded in our memory bank for a very long time.
It's certainly forcing the sports books to get creative to come up with stuff to bet on in terms of hockey. And one of the more bizarre ones I've seen is they're putting out, like, let's say the Coyotes and the Panthers were playing today, they're putting out a bet on that day which stock of the corporation that sponsors the company's rink will go down the most today. So if the Oilers were playing the Leafs, you'd have, is Rogers stock going to go down more than Scotiabank stock? So they're really, and they're trying to, like every other business, trying to figure out a way to survive this, and they've got their whole business is people betting on things, and when the things that aren't normally there to bet on, they've got to find ways to keep people betting. And I'm sure you've heard the argument with, why are they keeping the liquor and beer stores open? And the reason is they don't want a bunch of alcoholics suddenly drying out, coming to the hospital because they just don't have room for them. I think it's the same. You got to keep the gamblers. You got to give them something to gamble on.
Well, for sure. And, when you think about the leagues being on hiatus, you think, well, the management, doesn't have any difficult decisions. Then everybody's just kind of sitting around, just waiting for it to start. But, maintaining a strong public relations presence is important during this crisis. And as an example, I will give you, the Boston Bruins have created a firestorm in Boston by laying off all the people. They were the last to offer any sort of help for part-time employees. Now all of a sudden they've announced pretty massive layoffs, and people are going, well, Jeremy Jacobs, the owner, who was the chairman of the board, I believe he still is, maybe not, but he was for a lengthy period of time. If he's not, of the board of governors, is worth billions of dollars. I think $3 billion or more, and he didn't reach out, and he's acting as if this is just sort of a normal recession type layoff situation, as opposed to kind of a crisis that was brought upon us where no one could have possibly predicted. And it's almost like an act of God, no different than a tornado or a hurricane, where where those kinds of things usually result in management being sympathetic to what their employers are going through. And the league's had tough decisions as well. I just saw in the NBA is Adam Silver, the commissioner, has taken a 20% pay cut, and the league, the NHL, has already, I believe theirs was 25%, if I'm not mistaken. And all that's under a microscope. So there's a lot going on, even when they're not playing, and the decisions that are having to be made. And I don't envy, and we're going to talk a little bit about this, the decision that someone's going to have to make, someone being Gary Bettman, who will make it ultimately in consultation, obviously, with his what we'll call his cabinet, his advisory group, and of course the board of governors. He works for them, but that this is not going to be a simple decision. When to come back. If you come back too early, and then there are more cases, and if you come back too late, and I think this is one of the issues that isn't brought up enough. Like, before, I didn't understand why there seemed to be this sort of drive to try to complete, if at all humanly possible, the regular season. But, now that I realize how much money is at stake here, I just assumed it, since we were near the end of the regular season, that most of the revenue had been accumulated already. But, that doesn't factor in the high percentage of money that comes from the playoffs, but also in the completion of the regular season. And I think that what we forget in all this, it isn't just the loss of the money. It's a disruption of the competitive process, because, this is a salary cap league, and NHL teams plan and build based on the belief. Now you can say that they should give themselves a little leeway so they don't get in the spot, but they just assume that they'll either have a flat cap where it will continue to be what it is, or more likely it will grow even a little bit, because this has been a growth league for a long period of time. And wasn't that long ago that they were a $3 billion league, and now they're a $5 billion revenue league. So, from the competitive standpoint, it's also important to maintain, this revenue stream at the $5 billion, because there are teams who have already, moving forward, counted on the salary cap being in the neighborhood of where we're at now. So if it had if we lost 20% of the revenue this season, and then we lost games next year or had to have a reduced season, could the Maple Leafs, for example, what would they have to do? I mean, would we have to have compliance buyouts in order to move forward? So this is sort of a complicated situation for the NHL. And of course, the NBA has its issues as well. And I think that's why all of a sudden we're hearing discussion about, well, maybe we can finish the regular season in June, maybe, and then and then maybe in July and August have playoffs, or September even, and then take October off and start the next season in November. Like, you hear all sorts of things about what might be possible.
Yeah, TSN floated one out yesterday that apparently was from an NHL source that suggested it had been proposed during that conference call earlier this week, which would be, the season, basically a quick training camp, finish the regular season in July. August and September would be the playoffs. They take October off and start the new season in November. So you say there is all kinds of things going on. And you mentioned about, money. And one we should note is two people we know pretty well, Jim Nill and Jim Lights in Dallas, both took 50% pay cuts to hopefully ensure that no one from the Stars organization would have to get laid off during this shutdown. And I think in Boston, if you're Robert Kraft, aren't you the happiest guy in the whole state right now? Because all of a sudden, no one's giving him crap about letting Tom Brady go. They're all crapping on Jeremy Jacob.
Yeah, no, that's right. I'm certainly not surprised by either Jim Nill or Jim Lights. I've known them both for a long period of time, and that would certainly be keeping within their personalities to make sure, they're team guys. I mean, Jim Lights is has always been known as a team guy. And obviously Jim Nill, everybody knows that. Jim Nill might be the nicest general manager in the NHL. And there are some really nice guys on my GM. So I don't make that statement lightly. But I'm certainly not surprised at that. But, I think my message to all hockey fans is everybody needs to be open-minded. Like, let's just be thankful when it comes back and not be so critical. This is an impossible decision to make, and it'll be made in consultation with the players, which is what it should be. Everybody will weigh in on what it means. But look, it not everybody's going to be happy with what they decide to do. This was nobody's bright idea. It was thrust upon them. And that, you got to try to figure out a way to do it that's, kind of best for everyone. But, people have said, well, maybe some of the fans won't come back. And I say baloney. I say that, the fans are just can't wait to have sports. I think it's really brought home how much the sports world is part of our culture. I know me personally, every morning it's part of my routine to get to sports, find out what's happened. And generally it's rare you find fans, although maybe I'm wrong on this, but why don't you weigh in as well, Bob? But you don't find fans of just one sport. Like, sure, hockey is my sport. It's been my sport for more than 3 decades. It's what I've written about most. But I follow, all sports. I have a general knowledge even of kind of golf and tennis. It's not an intense knowledge, but I sort of have a general idea of what's going on. And I think most people are that way. Where you sort of pay attention. Maybe you don't watch every golf tournament, but if Tiger is leading the Masters, you're in. And if Serena's got a chance to win the U.S. Open, you're in on that. And on Sundays, we sit on the couch and complain about instant replay in the NFL. And you tune in for 3 or 4 innings of a baseball game. And we can't do any of that now. So I think it's really brought home to all of us how much sports is part of our culture.
Today, I've done this periodically since all this began, just flipping on the sports streams to see what is out there, what's still going on. And every time I've done it, I've managed to find something. Even last weekend, some of the English soccer stations that would normally be showing the Premier League were showing old games from the 80s. And I watched a few of them. And today I flipped it on, and it actually said there are no events scheduled today. That's the first time, I mean, in the history probably of sports, that you could turn on your TV and see under sports, there are no events scheduled for today. I kind of felt like Charlton Heston and Omega Man, the sporting version. Oh my God, the apocalypse is here. It's all gone.
Yeah, I mean, it really is just just strange. And all you got to do is turn on in Canada, TSN, and US ESPN, or any of the sports stations. And, as the boys and women struggle to fill the sportscast, trying to figure out, what level of analysis, thankfully, this is a sort of the modern sports world, because can you imagine in the 60s or 70s when really all you were allowed to do was to report the news? Analysis was kind of frowned upon, except in things that were clearly, marked commentary, and which were, usually done, once every 2 weeks or so, or maybe once a month. And now at least that, you're allowed to do some pretty in-depth analysis. And, Tom Brady, move from New England has been grist for, at least television sports, to have them something, because you can certainly analyze that till the cows come home, and then maybe an hour or two longer, and you're still okay in America.
And the NFL really is saving us right now, because they're operating as business as usual. Obviously it isn't business as usual, because they couldn't fly Tom Brady to Tampa Bay to have the massive welcoming press conference like you would have when you sign a major star like that to a new team. But they're still doing the signings. They're making trades. They're operating as if there's going to be a training camp this summer and a season in September. And, it's kind of the one bit of normalcy, it seems, still in the sports world.
Yeah, I mean, people call it business as usual, but I find that term a little bit ridiculous, simply because, all they're really doing is things that you could do in any of the sports. I mean, you could still, in baseball, sign somebody, or, and in the NHL where, college players are signing. But in the NFL, their news is much bigger when they sign a guy. And because of that, it just seems like everybody feels, well, the NFL's, it's business as usual for them. Well, they're not doing anything the other leagues are doing as well. And it's like you said, I mean, it's really just stuff you could do on the phone. And, there's a lot of companies that, you can, I'm not sure my bank is as well. It probably is open, but, I wouldn't go to my bank, but if I called my bank, you can talk to them, and they can help you in that way. And I have a financial advisor, and I emailed with him about my tax return. So I think the NFL and sports are doing what everyone's doing, which is they're kind of hunkered down, but they're still trying to, exist. You're still writing stories, I'm doing whatever little freelance I can get as well. So everyone's sort of doing something. We're just, not doing it in person, and we're doing it 6 feet away from anybody else in the room.
Mm-hmm. And there are still bets on hockey. And one of the ones I found this week, Bet Online, one of the biggest online sports books in the world, is offering a prop bet on the NHL season, whether or not there will be NHL games played before June 1st. Now, the odds are minus 550, which means you'd have to bet $550 to win $100 that there will not be games before June 1st. And I would think that isn't even gambling. I mean, that's like, if you've got a whack of cash in the bank, that you got to put it on that bet, because there's no way there won't be ice in the rinks on June 1st, let alone players skating on it.
That's interesting. I mean, the way to view that would be, if your buddy called you up and said, hey, I'm part of this group, and it's a new tech company, and we've got this special unique thing, and we're offering an 18% return for a 2-month investment. Now, you could lose your money with our investment, because maybe it won't work out. But I'm pretty confident that, if you give us $550, we're going to give you $650 back, on June 2nd. I mean, that's the same thing to me. And, because, you can lose all your money if there's some weird thing happened. And as our president predicted, we had churches filled on Easter Sunday, and suddenly, we're no longer going to be sequestered, and it's going to be truly business as usual. Then I guess that would be possible. But I would take that bet. I would invest $550 for a chance to, is you're not going to get that return, certainly not now in the stock market. So that's a good bet. I mean, if you have a lot of money, if you bet $1 million on that, it's a lot of risk, but is that about 18%? I'd have to figure that out.
I'm very good, Matt. You're talking to a guy who majored in history and English, so math is not.
Yeah, I did too, but I'm sure some of our listeners can do that in their head, but I'm not able to do that. But that's an interesting situation.
Well, 100 would be 20% of 500, so at 500,
right,
you're probably right around that ballpark, about 18%. Now, it's not been a good week for the sport of hockey. We've seen the KHL announce their season is done; they're not going to play. The Canadian Hockey League, which encompasses the OHL, QMJHL, and WHL, canceled their season, which means for the first time in history there won't be a Memorial Cup champion. Even in the year 1919, when the flu epidemic wiped out the Stanley Cup, they still got the Memorial Cup in. So they've never had a year until now where there wasn't a champion inscribed on the Memorial Cup. The NHL has canceled the draft, canceled the scouting combine, canceled the awards. Everything points to grim news coming from the NHL, yet there seems to be a sense of optimism this week. I would have said last week they're not going to get a season in, but now there just seems to be, I don't know if it's just the resolve of hockey people, but it seems like there's a quiet optimism that at some point they're going to play this year. What's the sense that you get about all this?
Bob, I think you're absolutely right, and that's exactly how I phrased it in another interview. I had actually come out and said that it just really, this was 3 days ago, I said, it just feels like the season is over. I mean, it's hard to imagine circumstances, changing. The news is so bad in terms of the number of deaths, and every day there's discussion in the United States about a new hot spot. Louisiana now has come out of nowhere to suddenly, and now Spain is sort of replaced Italy as the world place where there's lots of issues. And I started to think as well, once we get this sort of resolved, I mean, what is the big caution coming out of China now? Out of China, where they had, this originated, where they seem to have it under control. Now they've had sort of for the lack of a better phrasing, a relapse. And what they're saying is caused by is, they're allowing people to come in from other countries where, the virus is still going on. So their caution to America, if we're to believe the U.S. government, has been, you got to keep that ban on foreigners longer. Well, what would that mean for the NHL, where we have a lot of foreign players who are going to come back? And of course, visas. And I don't know how the visa process works, but I always hear them talking about, well, you get a work visa for a season. Well, now the season would have to be longer. So is that going to cause issues as well? So all those factors, and again, I don't know all the ins and outs, but I've been covering the league long enough to know that those are issues that are real and stuff that has to be dealt with. And of course, the contract issue. So in my mind, 3 days ago, I'm thinking, boy, with everything that's going on and people still dying, and how do you have a competition? Are you going to have to test all the players? I'm thinking we're not going to play. And then all of a sudden, you start hearing, well, they're checking on dates for the arenas in August. The players are okay with playing during the summer. There's more sort of plans sort of circulating about what would be possible. You start hearing things like the league says, and I understand why, for the salary cap, the impact on the competition and everybody's budgets for the next 2 or 3 years have sort of been mapped out based on the fact that there would be either the same cap or growth. I mean, certainly not anything dramatic loss. All of a sudden, you start to hear like, yeah, maybe we can play. And I think when the president, who took tremendous criticism for this, suggesting that he was expecting perhaps we can lift the shelter in place deal and we could fill all the churches by Easter. When he said that, did that play a role in it as well? The fact that he's saying we got to jumpstart the economy. We had a lieutenant governor in Texas talking about the need to put a priority on that. And again, drawing heavy criticism because even at the extent of putting perhaps the elderly in danger, which it's even hard to believe that would come out of someone's mouth. But all those factors and, the need to get the economy jump-started, I think that's sort of helped sort of create a little bit more idea that, maybe everyone's going to work a little harder to figure out how to get back, a little sooner.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, we're dealing with something that's such an unknown. We don't know if this, I've heard today that there's projections from the government in my province, Ontario, that, we might not hit the top of the curve on this until June or July. Now, if that's the case, I don't see how we can play hockey. But, everybody's just kind of going based on stats and numbers right now because we don't have any trends or past history to base it on. So no one knows how long this is going to last or how much impact. I mean, Canada doesn't seem to be, for the most part right now, taking it as badly as the U.S. We're not having as many cases. We're not, I mean, percentage-wise, obviously we got a lot less people than you. But in my hometown, Windsor, we just had our 5th case today. There's 50 people in the hospital that they think have it, that they're waiting for their tests to come back. But I don't know what the difference is. Maybe are we just behind the curve kind of on, as it didn't hit us till later than you? I don't know. It'll be interesting the next few weeks to see what happens because they estimate close to 1 million Canadians came home from vacationing during what was supposed to be March break. So we'll see if they do the shelter in place as they're supposed to do when they come back, or they don't. We could see an explosion in cases in our country over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, you're just right across the river. I mean, we've had 3 members of the Detroit police force, die of after being tested positive for the virus. So Detroit is it seems to be another hot spot as well. So, and that's obviously right across the border. There's nothing magic about the border and the bridge. It certainly could get across, and there's a lot of interaction, as we all know, between Detroit and Windsor. So I mean, I think that was very insightful what you just said about nobody knows, because I think that's the thing that everyone should remember when this goes on too. We're all just and I've tried to be careful in all this discussion. Like I don't know exactly what's going to happen, and no one knows exactly what's going to happen. I think when we start talking about it, I think all we're trying to do is to facilitate the discussion, because I find that I learn more as this goes on. It's funny, but I said early on, well, I wonder what happens with the contracts, and subsequent to that, I've seen stories. There've been some discussion, people who know more than I do about the discussion about how that could help, and I've seen little stories about might we have to have compliance buyouts if the salary cap drops precipitously moving forward, and all that kind of stuff. So there are a lot of people thinking about it, and I'm sure Gary Bettman has in his mind looked at what he considers the 4 or 5 best possible scenarios, and I'm sure he's looked at the worst case scenarios as well, and I'm sure he's got those chronicled in his mind or on paper, and he'll try to make a decision based on that, and we'll obviously all going to have to live with what's decided. But you know what? I keep saying that it's Bettman's decision, but really it's the virus's decision. The virus is going to dictate what happens here. The virus is in charge. As much as Donald Trump, our president, or your Prime Minister Trudeau wants to be in charge, right now the virus is in charge.
That's exactly what Dr. Anthony Fauci said today. The specific words he said, that the virus is going to make these decisions for us. We're not going to make them, and I think that's in every walk of life right now. And I know one thing: we're all just going to keep living day by day and get through this. But for now, we're through our time for another week, and we'll be back again with our regular session on Monday. And look forward to seeing everyone join us and see where we're at in a few days from now. It seems like this whole thing is a day-by-day change, and we'll find out where we're going, I guess, then. And until then, we'll see y'all, and have yourself the best day you can have.
Be safe, everyone.